It's me again. Hi everyone. This time I would like to show you how to turn this into a better, how can I say it? How to turn this into a way better render at the end of your modeling when you want to showcase your work. So for this example, I'm gonna take this model that I sculpted recently, and before starting this video, I've tried to paint it in Procreate just one time to see how it goes. This is the painting done in Procreate, and I'm gonna showcase for both situations, either if you do have the painting already made or if you don't have the painting, how you can improve your model with a few tips and tricks about lighting and post-processing your work. I'm using the latest update of Nomad, and this particular model has 1.69 million vertices. As you can see, there is no post-processing whatsoever done on this model. And by post-processing, I mean it's just the sculpt. You won't have any effects on the model itself. Not yet, at least. First of all, we're gonna play with some lights. I'm gonna bring my model into the position that I would like to showcase, which is this. And I'm gonna add a few lights. First of all, I'm gonna add a directional light, which I'm gonna put it something like this. After hitting those three dots, you will notice a few options, which is to show or not the light itself, to clone it, as in to make it a duplicate, to recenter the light, to adjust the light, or to switch between directional, spot, or point. For this light, I'm gonna keep it directional and the intensity not too high. Over here at shadow, you can see that just by switching on and off, it will render way better shadows. And for this example, I'm gonna hit screen space, also a little bit of softness, not too much, just a little bit. Okay, now that the directional light is on, we're gonna add a new one. This time, let me just bring it to the left. This time I'm gonna put a point light and reduce the intensity all the way to, let me say, 2.26. It doesn't have to be precise, but around somewhere like that. Also screen space with a little bit of softness, just so it won't have like really sharp, edgy kind of looking shadows. And for this point light, I'm gonna go all the way red. I'm gonna take this one and I'm gonna do a clone and move it all the way to the other side. But this one, I'm gonna put it with blue. Alright, now that I have the model like this, the blue one, I'm gonna pull it a little bit to the back, red one, something like this. And if you notice from the top, you're gonna have three different lights hitting the model. Now, just by going to the shading section of the app, you notice the environment. Check out all the environments that you have built in from the app and choose the one that fits better on your model. For my example today, I think this one a bit cold but not too dark. It's like inside of a room, works really well with the white of the model. Keep in mind this is PBR rendering. From shading you have lit, unlit, ID and madcap. I'm gonna use lit PBR. And now from the same section, the shading section, I'm gonna reduce the exposure. Just by doing so, you can already see a way more dramatic look on the model. And this is without any post-processing whatsoever. You notice that if I play with 3-finger drag, I can find different types of shading will put my model in advantage. For example, this one, I'm gonna bring it to something like this, maybe more on one side or the other. I think the model it's already way too symmetrical to center the light to the middle so that the shadow will hit the middle of the nose like this. It's a little bit too far out there. So I'm gonna pull it a little bit on the side like this. Also, I think I'm gonna reduce the exposure a little bit more. Check out how it looks with the painting as well. For example, if I turn off the lights and turn on, off and on. With the painting on, I think it needs a little bit more exposure, something like this. But for now, let's reduce the exposure and turn off the painting, the texture actually that was made in Procreate. Painting itself, I painted in Procreate. I think painting, in particular low poly models, because I reduced every part of this model all the way under 100k vertices. Painting it in Procreate allows you to paint way better detail on a low poly model rather than to just go crazy with the polygons or the vertices up to millions so you can paint really detailed. Okay, so now after we have the settings for the light that I'm actually quite happy with, I'm gonna go to the post-processing part and I'm gonna turn on post-processing. Already you can see some improvements because I have the sharpness turned on, which I'm gonna turn off, and the vignette. I'm gonna start from the first ones. So I'm gonna turn on max samples and full resolution. The render resolution, so you won't force your device and end up with a laggy kind of viewport display. I'm gonna leave it at 1 and max frame sampling at 20. I'm gonna turn on reflection, global illumination. It's up to you if it helps you or not. In my case, I think for now it doesn't help that much. On to the next. I think this is one of my favorite features, which is ambient occlusion. And by playing with these settings, you can actually bring the model way more realism on how every object interacts, as intensity of the shadings, also color bounce between surfaces. For example, if I were to turn on use textures and play with ambient occlusion, you can already see that it has a major effect on how everything looks. I won't use it too dark and I'm gonna turn off the textures just so you would see a way better result of adjusting a few of the options in post-processing. So I'm gonna keep it somewhere. The strength of it, I'm gonna do it, let's say 0.324. The size, I don't want it too big. Let's keep it 0.23. And the curvature bias, I'm gonna use it around 0.441. Depth of field next. Far blur and near blur is pretty much self-explanatory. If I were to see the model somewhere around here and tap the nose, the near blur will affect everything that is close to us because the focus point is on the nose. If I were to tap on the crown, you see everything is blurred in the back because depth of field far blur is the first option and allows you to control how much blur you want the more far objects from the viewer's point. Let's say for the near blur, I wanted just a little bit if I were to focus everything on the nose, and the far blur a little bit more, something like this. But the near blur not that much. Alright, I'm gonna go back to my pose. Now, bloom. Bloom is a feature that allows you to make everything that shines or glows way more blooming. It's just like that. It intensifies lights, also the everything that's glowing. For example, I'm gonna turn on the texture because over here it might help, and I'm gonna use intensity of the bloom way more strong, and the threshold, if I reduce it, you can already see how it interacts on the bloom side of things. I don't need it that intense, so I'm gonna reduce it a little bit just to have a little bit of color in it, something like this. Also, let's turn off the texture, because for this example, I'm focusing more on how everything looks without the texture. I wanted to do the texture, yes, the painting itself in Procreate, just to see it like side by side, or to have the possibility of switching it on and off. Alright, I'm gonna reduce the exposure just a little bit more for more a dramatic look. And now we're gonna head over to tone mapping. Tone mapping allows you 3 possibilities of adjusting the exposure, contrast, and saturation. For my example, I'm gonna reduce the exposure a little bit, increase the contrast but not too much, and the saturation I'm gonna reset it. I think the exposure I'm gonna reset the exposure as well. Just the contrast, it's a little bit adjusted, something like this. Color grading, this is for those that would like to adjust the color itself. On the main side, you would have the levels, so to say. High, middles, and darks. You can adjust these to make even more of a dark or bright look. For my example, I'm gonna reset the main, show you the blues. High blues, medium blues, dark blues, which refers to the dark blues would be the shadows. You would see the shadows turning blue or not. Mediums will turn blue or not, and highlights as well, blue or not. I'm gonna reset it because I like how it looks without color grading, and I'm gonna turn it off because I don't really use it unless I have to color adjust or correct something along the way. Curvature. Now, curvature is a feature that allows you to give a little bit of outline to the bumps and the cavities of your model. Let me go a little bit closer, and you can see everything that has a cavity. Just by going on and off, it will give an outline. For example, if I were to turn it white, this could work like a halo effect on the whole model. The setting itself, you can apply it and adjust it to the whole model, not individual parts of the model. But if you play with it, you might find some funky effects that could help or not your models. In this example, right now, as you can see, is way too exaggerated, but if you play with it and even see the polygons that you have, it might give an interesting look along the way. Actually, I'm quite liking this red kind of look, and I'm gonna reduce it a little bit, something like this. Like I said, in pretty much every tutorial that I'm making, this is meant to be all experimental work. It's not a rule of you should or should not do this. Just play with the features. Try not to frustrate yourself too much if you don't get it from start. just experiment and have fun with it. Sculpting in general, I find it to be a really, really entertaining way to create. So just go nuts. Okay, I'm gonna actually go with the bump as being black to give it just a strong outline, and the cavity as well. I'm gonna max both of them all the way to 1.0 with the color being black. Chromatic aberration is a function that gives this red, green, blue-ish effect, which can help in some cases, but in my example it doesn't do me that much. The vignette, you can adjust the size of it and the hardness of it, just like this. I keep it somewhere around the middle, maybe something like this. It gives a little bit of more depth to the model and to the screen space itself. Alright, next one is grain. Grain helps you have a bit of texture. I don't know if it's visible or not. When I max it out, you can notice some texture that gives this grainy effect, and a lot of the times when you have imperfections, so to say, with the color, for example, let's turn on texture, it might help smoothen everything out just because it gives the whole image some texture. Alright, sharpness, which I think all of us are pretty familiar with what it does. It gives everything more clarity. The whole model is way more clear, and if I pull it all the way, you will notice even the polygons being visible. I don't use it with that much strength, but I do use it in general. I'm gonna turn off the texture again, and pixel art and scanline, actually the last three, and anti-aliasing. Anti-aliasing reduces flickering when you are moving the camera. That's why I keep it on by default, because it helps me view everything a little bit more clean. Scanline has the factor that will bring the lines way more visible and the spacing between the lines. In some cases it could help, it's kind of like a noise, but not every time. Also, pixel art is for the ones that really like this style of pixelating everything. It's quite of an 8-bit look, and it could be kind of fun to just see your model in basic blocks and squares. Why not? I'm gonna turn it off for our example, and we're gonna put the view back on. Like I said, back on. You can already see improvements on how dramatic everything looks. I, for one, think it could help you bring more interest and more captivating looks of everything that you create, because a lot of the times, especially for everyone that's at their beginning of the road with sculpting, they might get discouraged. Is that correct? Yeah, they might lose courage just by seeing a lot of hardcore and interesting renders. But like I've shown you, it's a few adjustments from here to there, a few, you noticed way more interesting look on a basic model. If the model is something that you enjoy doing or sculpting, why not add a few lights and a few effects to make it even more interesting? Now, keep in mind that the more effects you bring and the more you max out everything in your post-processing, the more it could increase, making everything go like shaky and not smooth. As you can see, I maxed out everything and it's already lagging when I zoom in, zoom out. I wouldn't recommend keeping those settings for post-processing when you're sculpting, because it's gonna give you a hard time doing it in a fast pace. I would rather use a matte cap when I'm sculpting and maybe turn off a few of the post-processing features, just so I won't get distracted or annoyed by some of the features. You can already see, yeah, for example, depth of field. When I'm sculpting, I don't need depth of field because it just kind of feels like it's getting in the way of what I need to do. Basically, that's pretty much it. I hope this helps you. I hope it's gonna bring your models way more interest and quality. I'm really looking forward to see your models after you used a few of the post-processing parts. And yeah, just have fun with it again. I insist on having fun because this is meant to be fun. It's one of the best ways to see situations, models, shapes, volumes, lights, textures, materials. It's supposed to be fun and interesting to work with. So just go nuts. I'm gonna do some screenshots of the post-processing of this model as it is right now. Maybe it will help with your model if you want to keep it in the same way. I'm gonna attach the screenshots in the ArtStation project. After posting this on YouTube, I will leave a link to my portfolio on ArtStation where you can find the screenshots as well. So, all that being said, thank you for your time. I really enjoy working in Nomad. Thank you to all the people that are part of developing Nomad, and special thanks to the Nomadsculpt group, where a lot of the feedback is like just a joy to read and to see people interact using this app. I really like this community. Thank you once again. And like I said, keep it creative.